Welcome to another episode of Life After Landing. I am your host, Khalees Williams. I'm the founder and the CEO of the Uprow app, the settlement app for newcomers to Canada. And on this series, Life After Landing, we typically interview immigrants who have gone through the process of immigration, and we find out from them the good, the bad, the ugly, the ups, the downs, in betweens, over the hill, and beyond. Right? But today we have a very special guest and something a bit different, right? Today we have a professional. Today we have an immigration lawyer. She's going to tell us all about herself. We're going to find out about her immigration journey, a little bit more about her, and we're going to be talking about pathways to PR for persons who have studied in Canada and who are currently studying, right? So we're going to change it up a little bit. We have the casual person, we have the person who has been going through the ups and downs of immigration. But you know what? Every once in a while, we need to go talk directly to the source and find out, what is the correct information for immigration, for making it as a permanent resident and thereafter a citizen in Canada. So I'm going to welcome to the stage Rowan Fisher. Welcome. How are
Hi.
you? Thank you
Hello.
very much for joining us. And
Thank you so
please
much for having me.
yourself. Introduce yourself to.
So, my name is Rowan Fisher, and I'm the managing lawyer of the Immigration Division at Osuji Smith Lawyers, which means I live, eat, breathe, sleep immigration with my team. And we do everything immigration, everything refugee, from temporary to permanent to bringing family to problems. And we love doing what we do.
So, Rowan, how long have you been in this field, and why did you get into immigration law?
Okay, so I was not originally an immigration lawyer at all. I was an oil and gas lawyer, and then I was a renewables lawyer, and then I quit law for like ages, years and years and years and years and years. And I was standing volunteering in a refugee camp in Greece. It was an Afghan refugee camp outside of Athens. And it's where people were transported to after they were picked up, often out of the ocean, out of the Mediterranean Sea, and transported
Wow.
inland into these camps. And I was standing there and I was like, you know what? I think you should go back to practicing law. And I think you should do immigration. You could help people come to Canada and stay in Canada and help people get settled here and do lots of community initiatives. And yeah, and that's how I became an immigration lawyer. So it wasn't my whole career at all. It was a really concerted switch, a really interesting decision to really change my life.
Interesting. So, how long have you been in immigration law, and what
So
was that?
I came back in 2018 from being away overseas, and I hadn't been a lawyer in Canada for years. And that's when I started my journey into be a really deep diving into immigration.
And I know that you work very closely with like various communities, and you're a real advocate for like, helping persons to be able to stay in Canada, dealing a lot within the refugee zone as well. And now you're the managing lawyer at OGC and Smith Law Firm, under the Immigration Law Department. So you've had a lot of extensive experience dealing firsthand with immigrants, right?
Oh
And I
yeah.
know that.
So
Mhm.
go ahead.
So I know that when we were talking about like students in particular, but can you give us like some background about what are some of these situations that you have seen? What is the typical type of immigrants are you dealing with?
Yeah. So because we deal with so many different kinds of files and so many different situations, we see absolutely anyone who has either a need to make an application or is having troubles with an application or are having troubles with their status in Canada. So when we're looking at students, we do everything from meeting students who really, really want to come to Canada. And they reach out and they've been accepted at an amazing designated learning institution in Canada. And they just want help putting their study permit together. They want us to help them with their study plan. They want us to help guide them through the forms, the online application process, make sure they have all their ducks in a row and everything else from overseas to be able to apply for a program in Canada. So that's the first kind of group of students that we work with. The second big group of students that we work with are those who are transitioning out of their study programs and now moving into work. So we're looking at students who are either moving from their educational program into a postgraduate study work permit or moving from their program into an LMIA-based temporary foreign worker permit. And we'll talk a lot today about the difference and why those differences exist and why the different conversations you have sometimes don't make sense when you're talking to other students in your life. So that's a big
Mm-hmm.
group. And then the other group we deal with, of course, are those who have now finished a postgraduate work permit, 1 year of work, and want to become permanent residents. So now we get lots of questions then on what do I do? What is this next step in this student to PR journey? How do I then move from a postgraduate work permit into permanent residency? And that's something we're going to talk a lot about today. And I'm sadly, and we're going to have a little bit of a chat on this as well. Another group of students we see are those who have fallen out of status, are having problems with refusals, getting procedural fairness letters for inadmissibility to Canada, and are really, really struggling to stay. So that's another group of students that we work with a lot as well. So we're going to talk about all of those today.
All right. So I know you have a presentation for us. So this is the first time we getting like the real deal here, guys. And I hope you're ready to take on Rowan. She has a wealth of information to share with us. I want you to drop your questions if you have any over on Instagram. I'm seeing so many people over on the Instagram feed, some here over on YouTube. Drop those questions if you have any. And get ready to take some notes as well because she came out for us. She's fully well prepared to give us all of the gems. Drop some time for Rowan, and I'm going to share your screen and you can take it away. I'm going to be collecting questions in the background as well.
Fabulous. Okay, this is us. You don't need to see that. This is me, just in case you don't know my name, but my name's under my face. So you don't even need this slide. We're doing well, 2 for 2. Us. So, when you're working with people in immigration, it's really great to work with people who have some immigration experience personally themselves, who have gone through the process, whether as children, whether as kids who came with their parents, as students, later on, as professionals. And our team is full of that. So it's really a nice conversation we get to have with students because the majority of people on our team are immigrants ourselves. And that includes me. I came as a small child and I came with my mom who had studied in Canada and I was coming back from overseas with 2 little children as an immigrant and was told to leave Canada. And we went under a removal order and my mom had to fight and she fought for years and I didn't become a Canadian citizen until I was 8. So me and our team, we have a lot of interesting personal experiences in immigration world that really informs our work and our compassion, understanding, and real, empathy for people who are going through different procedures and policy changes and problems. Just a reminder that this is not legal advice, particularly in the sense that I cannot give individualized legal advice on this platform. If you start asking questions like, I have this permit and I've done this and I need to do this and these are my documents, it is against the rules for me to provide that kind of detailed information, but I will try and frame it in a more general response and try and give you guys resources in place to look for stuff. So today, really, if you need a lawyer, reach out anytime. We do lots of consultations with students. Today really is about getting a general scope of how this all works, why it doesn't work, and how it kind of fits with your situation. Free legal services. A lot of people don't know how many free legal services there are out there. Calgary and Edmonton both have really big community legal centers. There's Legal Aid Alberta, and most educational institutions that have a law department have student legal aid on campus through the law department and the law students who are supervised by lawyers. So remember, even if you don't have a ton of money to pay for lawyers to do all the fancy stuff right now, there are some free legal services where many of us, including me and my team, volunteer all the time. Today, we're going to talk a bit about postgraduate work permits and other kinds of permits. We're going to talk a bit about timelines and why things take so long and what kind of deadlines you have to look out for, especially for those of you today who are postgraduate work permit holders. Then, of course, we're going to talk about permanent residency. What is this path? What is this student path to PR and how does it work? We'll often get questions on family and bringing family over and getting married, so I'll touch on that if people are interested in that as well. Please, like Khalees says, shoot her some questions as we go. She might shoot me some in the middle. We'll do lots at the end. I'll try and get this done and locked up in the next half hour, 40 minutes. So we've got some really good time for some good questions at the end. Okay, So the first thing is to understand is this really big difference between closed permits and open permits, because students go and have coffee together from different institutions and they talk about their experience and how they're going to apply for a work permit. And someone says, oh, you have to go and get an LMIA or sometimes a LAMIA. And someone's like, no, you don't. You don't have to get an LMIA, not if you're a student. Well, the issue is that some students do have to go and get closed work permits, like an LMIA-based work permit, and some students are eligible for postgraduate work permits. But not everyone is the same. So everyone gets in this conversation and everyone's fighting and, throwing coffee at each other, chucking donuts at each other's heads. But really, at the end of the day, it's just because there are different kind of permits for different kinds of situations. So one is called a closed permit and one is called an open permit. The most common closed work permit is an LMI-based work permit, which is basically something you can apply for from inside Canada on a valid study permit. But it is a closed work permit, which means you have to work generally for a specific employer at a specific location. And there's a bunch of other conditions on the permit that might apply, including hours of work or type of work. And this is a closed work permit. People who need to apply for this are often at designated learning institutions with short courses, or they just haven't, the institution itself has not been authorized by the Canadian government to be an organization that can issue or be a part of the postgraduate work program permit program. So remember, in these conversations, somebody's not necessarily wrong. They might just be having a different experience from you. Open work permits include postgraduate work permits, but they also include bridging open work permits. You can get open work permits if you're destitute as a student and you can no longer afford your studies. Dependents of permanent resident applications can get open work permits. Spouses or partners of skilled workers or international master's or PhD student partners can also apply. So there's lots of different kinds of open work permits. So again, when you're having conversations with people, be sure you understand the difference between your situation, your individual, unique background, situation, institution, and program, and the other person's. Because the person might be giving you advice, suggestions, ideas based on their own personal study permit experience. And it might actually not be relevant to you at all. So you've got to do your research. You've got to get onto the IRCC website and figure out the information as much as possible. And of course, attending sessions like today won't hurt either. Postgraduate work permit is a very, very specific kind of open work permit. It is only available for students from eligible designated learning institutions. DLIs is what the government calls all the institutions who are allowed to issue a study permit. So if an institution can issue a study permit to an international student, then they are designated as a DLI. And this list is online. So if any of you are coming in today from overseas, or you're thinking of studying and you're here maybe on a visitor visa and thinking of going to study here, make sure if you are going to study, you are at a designated learning institution. But not all designated learning institutions can issue postgraduate work permit, open work permits. The open work permit is different from a closed permit in lots of different ways. The first most important way that an open permit is like really, really beneficial to students is there is a direct path of application from the end of your studies to a postgraduate work permit to permanent residency. It's designed that way. So it really allows for a lot of flow of application for a student who's going through into a postgraduate work permit job. It's an open work permit. It means you can work for any employer and you can work generally anywhere across Canada. So it really is a more flexible permit than a closed or an LMIA-based work permit. Applications for permanent residence can be made through a variety of programs. There's lots of programs who, if you have worked a year on a postgraduate work permit, you'll be eligible then to apply for permanent residency. And really, people ask us a lot about, what kind of work should I get? What kind of work should I do? And generally, of course, you've gone to university here, you've graduated from a program. Most students then, of course, try and get a job in their area of now expertise after their degree. So that is usually the flow for students. You go into a program, you get your postgraduate work permit, you go into a position that's related, of course, to your degree. So again, what job experience or work experience is eligible for PR depends on which program you're going to apply for. So remember, there's lots of different ways and lots of different programs that you can apply for PR. All of this will make more sense in a moment. So when you're going from a study permit to a postgraduate work permit, one of the things you really have to pay attention to are the deadlines. Remember, these kinds of deadlines change a lot. At the moment, if you get your transcript before your study permit expires, you have 180 days from the day of getting that transcript to applying for your postgraduate work permit. So that's quite a long time. You can actually go and see what you want to do, find out what you want to do, and then apply for a postgraduate work permit within this 180-day period. So this little diagram here, I'm not going to go into this in big detail because we don't have a ton of time today, but this just basically shows, you apply for a study permit. If you need to extend your study permit for any reason, remember, you need to apply for that extension at least 30 days, if not more, before the expiry date. Then in this example, we have a transcript that's issued before the expiry of a study permit. So this person would have 180 days to apply for a postgraduate work permit. If you don't get your transcript before the study permit expires, and remember, the dates on your permits are really, really important. You want to put those in your calendar, put reminders in your phone, tell your friends and family so you do not forget these deadlines, because it really changes a lot of things if your work permit expires. And in this case, you can see if you don't get a transcript before the expiry of your permit, then you only have 90 days to apply for a postgraduate work permit. Now, anything I'm talking about today can change. It's very, very important when you're getting close to making applications and you're within 30 or more days of an expiring permit, you go online or book a consultation with a representative to talk about your options. Everything in immigration land changes in the blink of an eye. Something that I say today in this presentation may not be relevant, might not be accurate, it might be the wrong date, it might be the wrong number of days if the policy and procedures change at any level of government, provincial or federal. So make sure when you're making applications that you are really looking at up-to-date information. You're not looking on a dead website. You are not following Facebook. You're not following suggestions on Instagram or on LinkedIn. You are going only to the IRCC website, or you are booking a real-time consultation with an immigration representative who can help you and take you through all of these different things. Postgraduate work permit to permanent residence generally works basically, you apply for a postgraduate work permit. Let's pretend in this case it says here it's August. Once you've made that application, you can work. You're on maintain status until such time as a decision is made on your postgraduate work permit. So you apply for your postgraduate work permit, you can work, maintain status, you get your postgraduate work permit hopefully issued, and you get to go to work. Then you can apply for all kinds of other things. Maybe you need to extend a postgraduate work permit at some point because you need more time. Maybe you need to do a bridging open work permit. There's all kinds of situations that can happen in the middle, but generally from 1 year of beginning at work, you can then apply for various immigration programs. We're speaking from Alberta today, so we're going to look at programs like the Alberta Opportunity Stream, for example. We're going to look at Canadian Experience Class, because for all kinds of different workers, these kinds of programs are very, very useful to be able to apply for PR after a year of work on your postgraduate work permit. When you're making applications, when you're getting to the point when you have done your year of work and you're getting closer to the time when you might be able to make a permanent residency application, the question we always get is, what program should I apply for? So depending on the province you're in, there might be multiple opportunities for you. For example, in Alberta, maybe it's Alberta Opportunity Stream. Maybe you're an entrepreneur who's now graduated and wants to open their own business. Then you'd look at the Alberta Graduate Entrepreneur Program. Maybe you're in tech. There's a whole stream in Alberta just for people in tech. Maybe you're going to look at federal. Maybe you're going to look at federal programs now. So now you're going to look at Canadian Express Entry. And that the Canadian Experience class in Express Entry. All of these that you can apply for are dependent on what's called NOCs and tiers. Some programs are only for categories 0, 1, 2, 3. Some are for categories only 1 and 2, or maybe just 4 and 5, or maybe some programs are for 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Different programs allow for different occupation types to apply. And these are called the tier categories. And there's 6 of them as there are on the screen right now. 0 is actually the highest tier, and tier is training, education, and experience and responsibility. It's talking about the type of job, not the applicant themselves. Every job in category belongs to one of these 6 categories. Every single one. Cat groomer, bartender, teacher, financial advisor, home care provider, all belong in one of these tiers, and they're Googleable and they're online. So, for example, if you're going to apply for the Alberta Opportunity Stream, that actually is a stream that allows applicants all the way from high-level management style occupations all the way down to occupations that only really need some short work demonstrations, but no real formal education. So anyone from landscaping to bakers to chefs to computer people to managers in an architecture firm can all apply for that program because it is an all-tier program. However, other programs like Canadian Experience class, which is one of the federal permanent residency programs, you can only apply for those jobs if you have a year of work in tier 0, 1, 2, and 3. So it is a more limited program. Fewer types of jobs are allowed to be considered for that kind of application. So you have to know your tier. Your tier is designated by your NOC. The NOC is the number for your particular job. So there's a number for a cat groomer. There's a number for a lawyer. There's a number for a zookeeper. And those numbers are what get all classified into the 6 categories. So we have tens of thousands of NOCs that all get sorted into these 6 groupings. Names and duties of your jobs do matter. Okay, NOC stands for National Occupation Classification, but we just call them NOC numbers. As you can see here, something like an assistant can be classified in many different tiers. And if you don't put the right things on your application, you may or may not be rejected from a program because it looks like you're not eligible. So something like an assistant can actually span at least 4 tiers. So if I was applying, for example, for the Canadian Experience class permanent residency program, but I was a library assistant and I applied, my application would be refused because Canadian Experience class only accepts jobs in tier 1, 2, or 3. So it's really important. Know your NOCs. They're Googleable. You find them online. You want to make sure you look at the most recent version, which at the moment is 2021. And you want to make sure that the duties and all of the responsibilities in that description for dental assistant, physician assistant, executive assistant actually matches what you do. So be very, very clear on what NOC you are doing and what tier you're in. And this goes for job hunting as well once you've graduated. If you're looking for a job and you are hoping to apply for permanent residency, you want to make sure your job is the highest tier possible because you want to make sure that you have the most programs to apply for. The highest level programs allow for 0, 1, 2, 3. So if you go after university and go into a tier 4 or 5 job, you're really, really going to limit the opportunities you have and the types of programs you can apply for PR in. So a lot of what we do with students when we're sitting in a consultation with a student is planning. We do immigration strategy planning so that this path is kind of mapped out. We generally talk to students in their third year of a 4-year program, maybe entering into the second year of a second year program, where they're starting to think a little bit about, where do I want to go? What do I want to do? And how do I want to do it? And they need a plan. And we help them really design that plan. So that's a lot of the work that we do is, what did you do in university? What do you want to do during your postgraduate work permit? How do you want to apply for PR? Do you know your knock? Do you know your tier? That's super, super important.
So, Rowan, we are getting a lot of questions over on Instagram and on YouTube. People are like, oh my gosh, they are amazed at how much information you're giving. And guys, if you would like to speak to a member of the OJC and Smith team, definitely head over to the Uprow app. Go book that free consultation with a consultation credit. You get that credit towards your service, and you will get to speak to a member of your team and like map out the strategy, because this is a lot of information.
It really
This is
is.
like,
It really is. Yeah, it's hard. This is not easy, right? And it's long-term planning, which a lot of us kind of shy away from sometimes and find a bit scary. Why do you want to plan 3 years ahead, 2 years a year, 1 year ahead? And it's because, you end up in these situations where you're like done your postgraduate work permit, but you've really ended up in a tier 4 job and you didn't mean to. It just happened. And you thought it was going to be okay. You didn't know it was going to limit your PR, application possibilities. Nobody told you that. And so really getting in for a consultation, going online to the IRCC website and making a plan for yourself as a student is super, super important.
yeah. So what happens towards the end? So I'm seeing someone here on YouTube is saying, what happens if the knock code description does not match your current job title in terms of the letter from your employer, your
Oh,
skills, your Canadian experience? What happens when it doesn't match up? Like, what options do you have
okay.
when you
So,
get to the end? You're like, you're not prepared.
okay. So, your knock is your knock. So if you are, if you work in a hand cream factory, your job will have a knock. There's a knock attached to that job. If for some reason your duties and responsibilities aren't meeting that knock, and you've worked all this time saying, I'm a knock 1, 2, 3, 4. This is what I do. I do this thing. But you actually don't. It's the wrong knock. And you've made applications saying this is my knock and it's wrong. It means you have to do a lot of explaining. It means you have to contact IRCC. If you've applied with the wrong knock and you've applied with the wrong description, that's going to be a big problem on the processing of your application. That's going to be massive. There's going to be a disconnect for the officer reviewing your application. And we do not want disconnects in front of an officer. You want everything to look really well organized and that there's an easy flow and that it makes sense and that it's right. So if there is a problem on an application, we have to do a lot of work to try and correct it, including reaching out to IRCC and making sure those forms are as correct as possible. It's a very difficult situation to be in if there's mismatches on anything, on any application. Very hard.
And then I'm seeing a lot of questions as well about spousal open work permits. So people are really concerned about their husbands or their wives, their
Yeah,
common law
that's why
partner.
I added it in, right? So what
Mm-hmm.
happened, as most of you know, is the rules changed. So before the rules changed, you as a student could bring your partner and your kids. Okay, that was what could happen. They've changed the rules now. It is only master's students and PhD students. So it is a very clear line as to who can now bring their families in with them for an open work permit based on a study permit. Now, if you are already in process, it depends on which part of the process you're in. There is still possibilities that your spouse who's already here, of course, is locked into the program, the previous program. So they don't have to leave. They're not going to kick people out because you have an spousal open work permit from the previous rule time period. So you don't have to worry there. But yes, for new incoming, you have to be a master's or a PhD student in order to get that spousal open work permit for your partner. And remember, partner is not just married, it's also common law, it's also conjugal, right? In Canada, our definition of partner is really quite broad, and we can bring partners in, different kinds of partners, not just married spouses.
Right. So I'm gonna leave you to get back to this presentation because we're getting all of the gems. I know some people are taking notes, but I
Okay?
really just wanted to ask this question because it comes up all the time. So
Right.
your partner may not be able to come on a spousal open work permit, but what about the kids? What about the
So, yeah,
kids?
so it's really, really challenging. So the children can come in as your dependent absolutely on the master's and the PhD program 100%. Whether or not children can come in with you on other permits, it really depends on the personal situation of that person. So, for example, if you are a single parent with 2 kids, we have a much better chance of having those children come with a student than not, because there's no other care available for that person. These rules are changing all the time. There is a constant battle going on. There's constant reports being put out on what's going to happen and how it's going to happen. So it's really, really at the moment of application, again, you've got to look at the rules in place. What is in, like, today's application is going to be different from tomorrow's. So it's really, really important, because this whole thing is very much in big arguments and big discussions. The policies are changing nonstop. So the trick on this is make sure you read. When you are doing your application, you have to go and you have to read the actual rules at that moment. Okay?
Yeah,
Very
because and I
important.
with the
Very, very
kids,
important.
it happens in a way where I see it happen so many different ways. Where sometimes the kids have a visitor's visa, and you're in the airport, and the immigration officer will just issue them study permits without even having applied before
Yep.
for them to get their own study permits. I've seen that happen so many times before, and then we also have some persons who
Yep.
like just do the
Yep.
study permits for the kids beforehand, right? So it's like one of those gray
Yeah.
areas
Because
with the kids where
children
it's like,
with study permit. Yeah. It is really recommended that kids do have study permits. It really is that they recommended that they don't remain on visitor permits, that they go on the study permits. So officers will often issue study permits. Now, they shouldn't be doing that without the signatures, without the forms, without everything else. And it's very situation dependent. But I think it's really, really important to make sure that when you're coming in, you have all the documents with you for anyone you're traveling with. You want to make sure you have them with you, like in your suitcase, not just on your phone, which might be charged, that might die, might get lost, not just on your laptop, which might not work in certain places, but make sure you have a lot of documentary evidence with you with regards to what has been approved in advance, right? As much as possible. It is always at the discretion of an officer to let someone through the border or not. That is absolutely at the discretion of the officer at that border, at the airport, or however on the land border, wherever you're coming in. There's a lot of discretion. So make sure
right.
you're prepared. You have all of those documents and all of those things with you, 100%.
Okay, so I am going to go back on mute. Take it away.
Okay.
Second half of the presentation.
Problems. Here we go. Here are some of the problems. I'm also going to see if I can dig out some good links for you guys as well, so that I can copy and paste those into the chat. Troubles to avoid. I just want to talk a little bit about troubles and remedies, because of course, as lawyers, a lot of, I said, one of the groups of people that we see a lot of the time are people who end up in all kinds of terrible situations. So they've either violated conditions on permits. So in the case of students, maybe they stopped studying without authorization. They haven't let maybe IRCC know that they've changed institutions. They didn't check if maybe they could change institutions. Maybe they didn't change to the right kind of institution. Maybe they've needed big medical leave, but haven't informed IRCC. There's lots of ways that a study permit might be violated, which means you've just breached conditions. And mostly what happens is you're under an obligation to be a full-time student, and anything that interrupts that might be a problem later on. Inadmissibility can be found in lots of different ways. The way we most often see inadmissibility is criminal or misrepresentation with students. So one thing to know in Canada, driving under the influence is serious criminality. That is something that can get you removed from Canada. And that's not the same in all countries. So some students don't understand that they might be removed for something that is not illegal in their country, but that is illegal here. Temporary residents have very, very limited status in Canada and can be removed for lots of things. I've seen people removed for just a simple bar fight between friends that went bad. I've seen people removed for all kinds of interesting issues that they really didn't think were a big problem. If you have spoken to a police officer, sat in the back of a police car, been inside a courtroom, had a meeting with a criminal lawyer, make sure you are thinking about your immigration status as well as the possible criminal issue. Misrepresentation is basically a fancy way of just saying not giving the right information or giving absolutely incorrect documentation or any kind of information to the government. This is often not caught till later on. Some of you might have heard about the 700 students in Ontario that were found inadmissible for misrepresentation because when they applied for either their postgraduate work permits or their PR, false documents were found in their initial study permit applications from 4 to 7 years beforehand. So what happened was they made an application. The officers started going back through the application history and the travel history and the immigration history of the applicant. They looked at the primary application for the study permit from years before, and there were false documents in that. Now, in this particular case of these 700 students, it was a number of very criminal, unscrutable agents who had deliberately defrauded Canada. And the students didn't know. They didn't see their applications. They didn't sign their applications. There were all kinds of problems with that. The way to protect yourself from misrepresentation is to do what it says in the declaration that you sign on any form, which is you have read thoroughly, you understand, you gave the information, and the information is correct. And that's what you're signing at the bottom of an immigration document. So you need to read thoroughly. You need to understand what this is. You have to ask questions. Do not go blind into any application. You should see your application, double check the spelling, double check the name, double check the information being provided. Any representative you work with should provide you with your application for signature and review before anything is submitted. For online applications, what should happen is any document that's going to be uploaded into a portal should be presented to you. You should know the information. If you don't know the information, if you don't know what's on a form, you are now possibly going to be misrepresenting whether you know it or not. So be very careful with this. There's a very strong eye right now on all study permits, postgraduate work permits, and permanent resident applications from postgraduate students because of the issue of misrepresentation. So make sure you know who you're working with a reliable representative, and you have seen your applications and the information that's being provided, not just the application, but supporting documents. If you get a letter from the government that says, we see there's a problem with X, do not ignore that letter. Often we have students who come to us, they've been given some kind of letter, either a procedural fairness letter, which is with regards to inadmissibility, but any other kind of letter that says there's a problem, and they kind of stuff it under their sofa and forget about it. And then all of a sudden they're having huge immigration problems, and they're like, oh yeah, I got that letter 6 months ago, but I forgot about it. Don't forget about it. This is the difference between staying in Canada and being removed from Canada. Removals are really serious. You might get a deportation order that will not allow you to come back to Canada or apply for anything for 5 years, if ever. You might get an exclusion order, which means you're barred for a year from making an application. So make sure you know what's going on. You are not relying on Facebook. You're not relying on Instagram. You are not relying on LinkedIn. You're not relying on other websites. You are relying on responsible representation and the IRCC, ESDC, or other government websites only. Very, very, very important. So what happens when something bad happens? How can you get through this? Well, obviously, respond to letters. If you get a letter, respond to the letter, hire someone to respond to the letter. Even if you just pay for a couple $100 to sit with an immigration lawyer, discuss the issue, you will at least get a path. You will at least get some direction on what to do. Even if you can't afford to have them help you or represent you or do all the web form stuff or connect with the officers, you still might be able to afford at least getting the advice. So sometimes we can ask for reconsideration. If there's a refusal of an application and something really interesting has happened and we feel like there is a problem with the officer's decision, we can ask for them to reconsider the request because maybe the officer got it wrong or didn't read something correctly or didn't interpret something correctly. So sometimes that's possible. We also reach out to officers directly, especially when we're in removal situations. Inadmissibility might be going to hearings at the Immigration and Refugee Board of Canada. So going through the process of a hearing might be possible. A judicial review at federal court might also be a remedy available to you. Appeals of the Immigration and Refugee Board of Canada, though, are really only for permanent residents. So it's a very, very difficult situation. So it shouldn't really be appeals of the IRB. It really is procedures. Because if you have an inadmissibility against you and you want to, you get recommended to a hearing, that's going to be at the Immigration Division, not at the Immigration Appeals Division. Also, the best option sometimes is really to leave Canada and return later. If none of the other things work, if none of the other things apply to you, then you're going to want to just leave Canada, wipe the slate clean, and come back in later. But knowing which of these you can and cannot do, knowing what's possible for you compared to a person you were speaking to at the coffee shop the other day, means you should get some really good advice. If you're going to pay for anything, pay for a consultation with an immigration lawyer about your situation to get at least some guidance before you go off in the wrong direction. So, different programs for different people. We get lots of questions about Canadian Experience Class. Oh, first of all, were there any questions about inadmissibility or things going wrong, Khalees, that you want to throw in before I move into the programs?
I feel like if everyone is like this right now, I feel like everyone's like, so do you mean that drinking and driving can get me removed from Canada? Everyone is like, a simple bath.
What? I know.
Right?
I
So
know.
I think that people are a bit shocked right now, to be honest. And I'm happy that you're really putting this across because sometimes we don't think about it. But as a TR, you're temporary, meaning that your status isn't secure. So it's a bit like walking on eggshells for a couple of years until you secure your status, right? But you definitely need to know
But even PRs can be removed, right? This is the other thing. People think the golden ticket is permanent residency. Then I'm safe, then I'm fine, and actually you can still get removed for inadmissibility as a permanent resident.
Yeah.
So it's really important to deal with these things as soon as possible, as early as possible. Don't ignore notices, don't ignore warnings, and get some help as soon as you can, at least to see how big the problem is, right? At least to get that assessment done. How bad is it? That's an important step.
Awesome. So yes, go right ahead. No questions about inadmissibility.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe we're 4:45 already. Okay, we're going to go really quick, you guys. Okay, so please remember, all this stuff is on the IRCC website. Everything I'm talking about is on the IRCC website. Just Google it, get onto the IRCC website, and you can see these things. Canadian Experience Class is one of the most popular routes to PR from postgraduate work permit or from an LMIA work permit. Notice here that the language level changes depending on which tier you are. So again, this is why knowing your tier, knowing your NOC is really important. You only need a CLB of 5 for tiers 2 or 3 or a CLB of 7 for tiers 0 or 1. I don't need you guys to memorize this stuff. Feel free to take photos. It is all on the website. The most important thing to remember is that these criteria change program to program. So you want to make sure you're matching yourself, your work experience, your education, your language level, et cetera, to the program. So the amount of work experience will change program to program. Whether or not you need a job offer will change program to program. The amount of education you need will change program to program. So Canadian experience class, you need a year of work in the past 3 years. It is only for the top 4 tiers, but the language level changes, which is interesting because other ones don't. Express entry systems are really, really interesting. And the reason why is because there's several ways you can do express entry. People think about express entry and talk about express entry as if it's like one thing. It is not one thing. The Canadian experience class we just talked about is one of the federal express entry programs. But there's also Alberta express entry for anyone who is in the express entry pool already in and registered and applied for express entry. They can apply to Alberta or whatever province you happen to be in and say, I'm really great for your province. You need me. My job is a job in demand. I'm really established in your province. I volunteer, I work, I participate in community, etc., etc., etc. You should pick me out of the federal express entry pool for your province. And every province has these express entry programs that are sort of combined with the federal programs. Then there's also just express entry federal skilled worker that is not Canadian Canadian experience class. You don't even need a job offer to apply for that. You don't have to have studied in Canada. You don't even have to have worked in Canada to apply for that. So sometimes students come to us, they're partway through a postgraduate work permit, they work for maybe 6 months, they're now planning ahead to apply for Canadian experience class, and we find out they could have applied for federal skilled worker experience or express entry months ago. Months ago. They have tons of work experience in their home country, high level experience. They are a job that Canada needs. They'll fit into one of the very specific streams. And they could have applied ages ago. But because they didn't get the advice early enough in their planning process, they just did what they were told by everybody else and did what everybody else did and all the people in the coffee shop when they could have probably applied for PR a lot earlier. So it's really, again, important to get advice on all these different programs. If you're in tech, there is an Alberta Tech Express Entry program, and there's also now federal tech as well. There's also other provinces that have really specific, really interesting tech pathways. There's also medical field pathways. There's also pathways for French language speakers. There are so many of these coming up all the time, provincially in Alberta, all the other provinces, and also through the federal programs. So again, when you're getting close to the application time or you're doing some good planning, you want to think, who am I? What can I do? Where can I apply? What is going to be best for me? And get some advice early on so you don't waste any time. Alberta Opportunity Stream is a very interesting program in Alberta. There are mirrored programs across in different provinces, but the reason why this one is very interesting is it is for all tiers. It is an all-tier program. So unlike Alberta Express Entry, unlike the tech program, unlike Federal Express Entry, which is just tiers 0, 1, 2, and 3, Alberta Opportunity Stream includes tiers 4 and 5, which means many more different people in different kinds of jobs can apply. Also, you'll notice the language level is quite low. Federal skilled worker, you have to have a level 7 English. Canadian experience class, you have to have either a 5 or a 7, depending on your tier. Here, if you're tier 0, 1, 2, 3, you only need a minimum of 5. Or if you're CLB4, you can tier 4 and 5 can apply. So again, you're not going to memorize this. This is a lot of information in an hour, guys. Don't sweat the small stuff. You might be writing furiously, that's fine, but it is all online for you. And it is all updated regularly on the IRCC website. One interesting thing about Alberta Opportunity Stream that some people miss is that if you did the same job in what is called the equivalent knock in your home country, and then you come to Canada and you have a very short break between jobs, you get a job right away, and it's in the same knock, you can count that work experience overseas towards your PR work experience category. People don't know that. People forget that. So if I was a bartender in my home country, let's pretend it was Italy. I'm from Italy. I was a bartender in Italy. I was a bartender in Italy for like 5 years. Then I come to Canada and I get a job right away and I'm a bartender. Woohoo! Great. Got that job. You have a knock equivalency. Bartender in Italy, bartender in Canada. It means once you get to 24 months of combined work from the overseas work and the Canada work, you can then apply for the Alberta Opportunity Stream. Even if you came and worked 4 days in Canada and you worked 2 years before in that same job, you can now apply for a permanent residence. And people don't know that because they didn't come get advice. They didn't come talk to us and see what was going on. So again, lessons from today, you are your unique person. You have a unique background. Programs change overnight, and you need to make sure that you are matching your experience to that job or to that program. The Alberta Graduate Entrepreneur Stream I mentioned earlier, this is great. If you did 2 years of education in Alberta, if you have a CLB 7, and you can establish all kinds of partnerships and business and meet all kinds of business criteria, you might be eligible for an Alberta Graduate Entrepreneur Stream. This is yet another stream in Alberta for graduates of Alberta institutions. So there's lots. There's also a foreign graduate entrepreneur program. So when you're looking at PR, it's not just one thing. People really focus on express entry. They really focus, especially in student land, on Canadian experience class. But it's not always the only option. So make sure you are reading thoroughly, going through all this information as much as possible. And here's just the information on the family that you guys brought up already. Spouse, common law partners, and dependent children of international students may be eligible to accompany a master's degree or PhD student in Canada. Okay, so the student has to be eligible for a postgraduate work permit, which means you have to be in a postgraduate work permit issuing institution. You have to have you're going to have a valid master's or PhD study permit, and you are a full-time student. And full-time is something I want to talk about a little bit as well, because sometimes people get mixed up with the idea of full-time. Full-time is generally 3 courses or more, but it does depend on the institution. So it's really important you understand the schedule of your work and your study plan, the schedule of your institution. Make sure that, if there's any semesters that are put together, sometimes in some institutions, for example, summer and spring and summer are put together in one semester. So you are actually full-time during that semester, but on your transcript, it looks like you did 2 part-time semesters. An officer can see that and be like, no, they weren't full-time, but you were full-time. You did both those semesters at the same time. Also, always remember that if you do a course on a scheduled break at your institution, you must comment on that when you apply for your postgraduate work permit. Because again, to an officer, it can look like you only did 1 or 2 classes inside a particular semester, but it wasn't a real semester. You were doing extra courses during a scheduled break, but it looks like a semester where you only did part-time. And that can end up with having your postgraduate work permit being refused. So lots of tips there, lots of tricks, so much information, you guys. Craziness. Welcome to study permit, postgraduate work permit land.
Thank you very, very, very much, Rowan. I think people a bit overwhelmed, to be honest. I'm seeing those comments over on Instagram. Persons are asking some really in detailed, really in-depth questions. And I know if you missed the beginning, Ron would have said, definitely go book a course. So go over to uprow.ca, download the app, go into the immigration law tab. You will see all of the lawyers there. That's with the consultation credit for $25 Canadian. That will be
Yeah,
credited towards your service, and go actually speak and sit down and speak to a lawyer, right?
yeah.
Go
It just
get that
takes an
expert
hour.
advice.
It's an hour of your life, and I know it sounds expensive when you look at it. But what you need to think about is first, what else would you be spending that money on that's as important as your being able to stay in Canada in the future? And it
Mm-hmm.
means you'll have a guide. It means you're going to have a plan. You're going to have an idea of what all these things are, how it applies to you, and what you need to do next.
Very good. So someone is saying very informative. A lot of persons are saying thank you so much.
Oh, you're so
And then
welcome.
yeah, we have a lot of persons as well talking generally about those category-based drawers, right? So like the French drawers, those the
Yeah,
STEM drawers,
textures, medical, blah, 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 and those are going to keep changing. I think it's really important for people to like just keep looking at those draws. Like we've had tons of draws in July. July was like mega draw line. Now, for express entry, it was still 510 points and up. For those of you who know what we're talking about, I'm not going to go into the explanation at this point, but for
yeah.
those of you who knows what's going on in express entry land, it is high. It's 510 points. That's a lot of points to get drawn and to pull you
Mm-hmm.
out of the pool. For those of you who don't know, Express Entry is a competitive program. Highest points wins. Highest points you get picked out of the pool and you get PR. So you're always
Yeah.
in competition with everyone around you for points. And right now those points are high. 510 or up is hard. That's a hard
Mm-hmm.
ask.
That's a
So there's going
unicorn.
to be a lot of people staying in the pool.
That's a
Yeah,
unicorn.
it's hard. But they're pulling thousands of people. They're pulling thousands of people out last month. July was unbelievable for draws. So you just need to keep an eye on stuff, educate yourself, get some good advice, hit up Upro, hit us up. Just, you know, get some good advice. Good luck. I wish you all the best.
And thank you very much, Rowan. We are just making it to the end, right? I think you covered basically everything. I just want to hear, I have one last question for you. What advice would you give to someone who is
Yeah.
considering immigration or they're here already? So someone who's here already, they already did the student route, they're in student route, they're considering now applying for PR, right? But they're scared. They're scared of like the way immigration is looking. They're hearing all of these talks about immigration completely shutting down, and they're just like really panicked because they have invested a lot of money into studying in Canada. What advice would you
A
give to
lot
that
of
person?
money and a lot of time. Okay. So the first thing to know is be careful of the scaremongers. There's a lot of press out there. There's a lot of bad press out there. There's a lot of inaccurate press out there. Be careful where you're getting your information from. That's step one. Because at the end of the day, Canada is a country of immigrants. This country doesn't operate without immigrants at all. There are so many people we need in so many different skill sets, which is why we have these, specific draws because we're desperate for people in all different industries. Some places are desperate for construction, some are desperate for medical, some are desperate for tech, some are desperate for, there's so many different paths and there's so many different provincial programs coming up. I would say stay the course, read thoroughly, don't get swayed by all the stuff that you're seeing by different very politically motivated people. Think about what is your value? What is your value to Canada? And when you think of it that way, you are valuable to Canada. Canada does need you here. It's just the way Canada operates. We don't make enough babies. We don't have enough people. We need people and we need talented people and we need your skill and experience. So stay the course, get good advice, try not to read the scaremongering stuff, remember who you are, and just do your best.
And you know what? That's it. Thank you so much. That is perfection. That is like the bow wrapped up at the end. We want to say thank you so much, Rowan. And for those of you all who missed this live, it will be posted. So you all can go watch the replay and take those notes down and definitely head over to Upper and book that consultation call with Osuji Smith Lawyers and speak to a member of the team. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Khalees. It's so nice to see you again. We'll talk to you really soon. I know.
For sure. Take care. And there we have it, guys. Another episode of Life After Landing. I hope you all enjoyed like the little switch up. Usually we have those informal type of casual conversations about the story of immigration. This time, you know what? I wanted to bring the professional to hear it straight from the source, right? I wanted to give you all the gems. And I also wanted to stress on how important it is to get the right advice. Right? Don't just go off on a tangent about what someone else did 10 years ago. No, go get the advice from the source and make sure that you're making the right decisions and spending money in the right way when it comes to immigration. With that being said, I just want to remind you all one more time, head over to Uprow. For those of you who are on Instagram, comment the word up and you will get that link to go download the app and book that call with Rowan. And there's so many other calls as well that you can book on there. You can book free financial advice on there. You can go sign up for reputable recruiters throughout Canada for persons looking for jobs. So many free services. One platform that is going to help you to settle safer and faster in Canada. That is exactly what we are doing here. And you'll have an amazing, amazing, amazing weekend. Next weekend, we will not have a Life After Landing episode because we will be live at Carrie Festival here in Edmonton. Super excited about that, right? And so we'll be seeing you all the following week as we continue our series of Life After Landing. You'll have an amazing weekend. And remember, the journey's the prize. Bye, guys.